Hey everybody, Jimmy Smith. Of course, Cain Velasquez news. You know, every time I'm on it, I'm with this guy, Patrick Donahue, my attorney. Proud to say, also a Carlson Gracie Brown. But fortunately, I've never gotten any legal trouble, but I've needed him. But if I do need him, he's there. But before we get into any of it, I know you've been on it. You sent me a link to the Zoom. You were watching literally live as it was happening. You were watching the stuff pre-sentencing. You were all about it. What I couldn't believe, Cain Velasquez got 5 years. The reactions online were like disappointed. And I know they're probably thinking morally, and I know most people in MMA don't have a legal background, don't have any experience with it. This was I don't even want to say best case scenario because almost we were like anything under 10 years. If you saw a video before, this would have been
Right.
a home run. 5 years for attempted murder in public is cupcake time. A total win on all fronts for Cain Velasquez and his defense team. The first question I have for you, does it include time served? Is it really like a 2 year sentence? Yes or no?
I think it's actually less. So California has really interesting laws when it comes to credit. So
Okay.
basically, I think he's going to be out in a little over a year. And like that year that he does spend, I think that there'll be re-entry programs. You might see him in work release like immediately. Um, I think this sentence is incredible. Let's not forget he shot somebody, like
In public, on a public
in
street.
public.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And they apparently played for the first time ever in public it's like an 11-minute 911 call from Galarte's mother. And she's saying like he's following us, she's shooting at us, he hit my husband, my husband's bleeding to death, help us,
Yeah.
help us, help us. So that's about the worst evidence that you could ever play at a sentencing hearing. And he's still got virtually almost time served. I mean, of course, it's not time served, but we're talking nothing here. At the beginning of this, I think I said 16, 17 years. And there was maybe we were talking in private, or I think it was one of the videos you were like 6 years would be incredible. I was like, there's no way he's getting 6 years, but you called it. I mean, you,
I, but the idea, I don't think people can separate, and I understand that. Please let us know in the comment section. I know what's going to happen here. There's morally and legally.
right.
Legally, 5 years as a Kane fan, I'm throwing confetti like this is as good as it was ever going to get. As you said, virtually time served. He could be home in 6 months to a year, right? He had 2 years of house arrest. I don't know if they
Right.
count house arrest as incarcerated time? Is there a scale? Every year
Right.
of house arrest is
So
three
as soon
months.
as
Like,
as soon as he got the sentence, I was like, I was doing math. I was
right?
like trying
Yeah.
to
So was
figure out
I.
like
Yeah.
day to day. So what I think is weird about California is I think they're giving him double credit for the time he was in jail. So every day counts for 2 days, but then partial credit for house arrest. So long story short, the shooting happened like 1100 days ago, but they're giving him credit for like 1250. So that leaves us roughly 2 years. And then in California, you do, as far as I understand, again, not a California lawyer, you do like if it's a non-violent crime, you're doing 50% of your sentence. If it's a violent crime, you're doing 85%. So taking all that into account, I think we're at like 15 or 16 months. And that's without like any type of work release or like they have these programs like reentry programs for people. Like they don't keep you in prison to the last day and then open the doors and then
Right.
your
Halfway
family's
house
waiting
stuff.
outside.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so and he's not a very like high risk criminal. He's a convicted felon now, but I mean, who cares? I mean, it's not like he's got to go get a job, at the
It's not
Social
like he can't be
Security.
president. Right. But
Yeah.
the idea here. So take us through it. What do you think the logic was here? This is not it was a serious crime. It wasn't public. It felt like from what I'm seeing, and you tell me, the judge wasn't considering any of that stuff in sentencing. It seemed as though he kind of bought the defense's argument that this is not a
Yes.
violent guy. This guy made a mistake. It seemed like he
Yeah.
bought that hook, line, and sinker. Am I wrong?
Yeah, you're correct. And
Yeah.
I saw a lot of writing on the wall where I was like, this is bad. First of
Yeah.
all, they didn't televise the sentence. So right off the bat, I'm like, oh, this judge is going to launch him and he doesn't want to have to deal with, people in the comments saying crazy stuff right at the Zoom. So I was like, okay, that's not good. and then state puts out a memorandum for sentencing 3 days before saying they want 30 years.
The prosecutor, by the way, let's back up and tell the folks this. Prosecutor wanted, I read 25 to life. You're saying 30 years. Maso Manos, we're talking the same
Right,
amount of time. 25 to life was what
right,
the prosecutor in the articles I read was asking for. You're saying 30 years. Sure. Roughly, we're talking about the same amount of
right,
time. And he got 5. The
right.
prosecutor was not trying to play ball here.
And I also found out for the first time that the reason I think that Cain pled is it took the mandatory life sentence off the table. They got rid of premeditated. So that's why he pled no contest to this crime, because if he would have went to trial and lost, it's a mandatory life sentence. So he rolled the dice and said, I could still get life. State's coming after me for 30 years. And then probation, so there's a third sentencing memorandum that's prepared by the Department of Corrections, usually probation. And what they did, they're kind of like independent because they have no skin in the game. They don't care. They got to watch after their prisoner. So usually what they ask for is usually the bare minimum that I think you'd ever realistically get. And they asked for 8 years. They said, we think, he should get 8 years in prison through probation department, not 8 years probation, 8 years prison.
Right.
So he even beat that. And again, none of this was televised, so or streamed. I'm sitting in the hearing for like 3 hours this morning, waiting for it to start, like the Zoom call. But what the judge did say is he said the worst punishment that somebody could have is being away from their son. So what does that tell me? It tells me that he buys Cain's argument that not only is this person an alleged rapist, but a danger to society. And he basically said, without saying it, I'm taking into account what's going on with the other case.
How could you not to give 5 years? If this were a
Right,
random act of violence, once again, this would, you're looking at 30 years, you're looking at life, you're looking at all these things. You said a mandatory life sentence with premeditation. As you're saying, the judge had to consider the all the things that he could have legally thrown out and gone, that's irrelevant. You didn't shoot that guy, you shot this guy, blah, 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 blah.
right.
Literally, he's taking all of that into consideration, at least.
Right. And we like to think that these people are impartial judges, but they're people. And the way I read it in a article is the judge was crying when he was giving this sentence. These are people who, they try to be black and white and try to be objective, but at the end of the day, this judge has to make a decision now of, do I take this man away from his child in the most important time of this child's life during trial? He's not going to have dad to go home to. And further than that, do I take him away potentially for a life sentence forever? And then you balance that with, he shot somebody who is objectively innocent in this, right? I mean, that person wasn't charged with the crime. So it's like, it's a tough job, and we like to make these people, the villain, the state's out to get us. And as a defense attorney, I know that sounds insane, but like the human element's always going to come into this, and I'm thrilled with the sentence that he got. I think that
It,
it's best case scenario.
once again, as a Cain fan, what you see the comment section and people, can't separate. When I talk to you and you talk to me about legal stuff, you're a lawyer and you're saying legally he did X, Y, and Z.
Right,
Morally, he did A, B, and C, right? So you almost have to go, yeah, I get why he did what he did, but he did shoot an innocent man in public and it permanently disabled him, by the way. He's lost the use of his arm because it
right,
severed the nerves in his shoulder. So the idea that he did something, full disclosure, we're both parents, right? Our kids are our
right,
friends, they're the same age.
right,
The idea that as a father, I get the emotions, but I also get the idea of the state saying, hey, you can't open fire on a public street no matter how you feel about what
right,
allegedly happened, because technically, legally, even the alleged molester is due his day in court, and he might be innocent as well. So all those factors flying around, the judge went, I believe Cain. And this is as close to free Cain as was legally possible. The people in the
right.
comment section who said, he shouldn't get any time at all. I get what you're saying morally. I really, really do. But the idea that a judge is going to go bang, time served would have been virtually impossible. This
Agreed.
is it. This is as close to a slap on the wrist where the judge felt he needed to give something, so he
Right.
did. But once again, by your math, he could be on the street in a year. I've
Right.
seen
And
DUIs get 18 months.
right.
Yeah,
And honest, and there's some places in Florida where if you drive with a suspended license, they'll give you a year in jail.
yeah.
So, we're still in the Wild West here in Florida. Two things that I thought were interesting. Number one, this is the sentencing judge is the same judge that granted him bail. Do you remember during like this
Yeah.
craziness where he couldn't get bail? So this is the same judge. So what does that mean? He was an ally for Cain all along? I don't know, but I think that that was a good judge to be in front of, especially after it seemed like there was other judges that refused to ever give him a release. Um, so I think that that's does that play a factor? Was this judge, I don't know, swayed the whole time? Who knows? But also, one of the things that the judge took into account, which I thought was very interesting, is he was able to, for lack of a better word, downward depart because he said that Cain showed genuine remorse and this was an isolated incident. This isn't something that he did all the time. He has no criminal record and he took responsibility for it, which in the judge's eyes, he was like, okay, well, now you gave me the ammunition. Ooh, bad term in this case. But
He
you
shot
gave
his
me,
shot. It's
yeah,
we can keep going.
you
Go
gave
ahead.
me what I need to give you a lesser sentence. You took accountability for your actions, and I'm going to cite that legally because a lot of the times what these judges are looking for is some type of legal way to give people a break. But you can't just go and shout to the lungs, at the top of your lungs, I shot a child molester and he deserved it. Well, again, this was the guy wasn't the child molester, but
Right.
you get what
I
I'm
shot
saying.
at a child molester. Right.
Right. So if instead you say, I made a mistake, this is an isolated incident, the judge now has a legal way to downward depart. And that gave them the out that he needed to give him the least sentence possible. So I think what a win. What a defense attorney to roll those dice. That's terrifying. To state wants 30, state wants life, and you get up there and you are able to get him 5 years. My God, that's a great job.
The idea that, and you put it in perspective, the state had a mandatory life if he goes to trial. So,
Right.
I, you as a defense attorney, right? If I did this and you were facing those odds, was it? I mean, clearly it worked, but a wise roll of the dice. Like, look, you're looking at a mandatory life, plea down.
Right.
You have no criminal record. Maybe we get a sympathetic judge, and he did.
Right. I, Masterful performance by the defense attorney. Would have I done the same thing? I have no idea. I think that at the whole time I would have rolled dice at trial. I think that there was some type of good defense with some type of CTE, diminished capacity to understand premeditation. I would open that door and then maybe you'd be able to get in. He thought this guy molested his child, so he didn't have impulse control. And then you bring in experts about his issues with head injuries and really be able to open the door to all issues in front of the jury. And maybe he walks or maybe he gets mandatory life. So well done.
Question. I know it's late. I just want to get this done today because I know people are looking for news on this subject. Is it easier to get a sympathetic jury or a sympathetic judge? He got a sympathetic judge. How much harder is that to get?
I I have no idea. Out of all the jury cases that I've ever
Yeah.
done and all the judges I've been in front of, every single time it's a roll of the dice. And anybody can tell you differently, but I've seen judges sentence people to life for crimes that I thought that they would sentence them to probation. And I've seen juries give people not guilty verdicts on cases that they were clearly probably guilty according to the law.
I love how
So
you stop yourself. That's awesome. You're like, probably my client was guilty.
the bottom line is Cain, the stars aligned, and this judge was a sympathetic judge. Went against the state attorneys that he's in a courtroom with every day, went against probation that he's in courtroom with every day, and gave them half the sentence that probation even wanted. Wow, incredible. So Cain, I hope that his family knows that he'll be home soon, and this was a victory. And the problem is now, and I'm sorry to bring a downer to it, but I also learned that there's civil cases against Cain from Galarte's family for like the intentional shooting. So it's just like it's never over.
But
He's
you're
got to
not
deal
gonna
with.
do a day in jail for a civil case. Like, yeah, you might
Right,
pay a lot of
right,
money. Sucks. I'd rather be
right.
free and broke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. Than doing a life sentence in California. So I'm happy for him.
And just to put a button on that, the civil case would happen if he's rotting in jail anyway. Now he can
Correct.
defend himself vigorously. He's will be free in
Right,
a year when all this stuff comes down. He's going to
right,
be there. Now,
right.
what I'm very curious about, before I let you go, the trial of the alleged abuser is in 3 months. I want to
Yeah.
say,
I think June 2nd, I want to
yeah.
say it's set for like calendar call.
How much will this be a factor in that? Will he be out in time to see the end of this? How does all right? We know how the molestation charge affected Kane's trial. How much will
Right.
Kane's trial affect the molestation trial at all, or is it? Do you think it's totally separate? I'm very
I
curious.
think it's totally separate. I think it's zero. However, again, that case is bizarre because it's one count up to 8 years. So I'm very curious to see, do they think they have a slam dunk case and they're going to get a guilty and that's why it's one count? Or do they have very little evidence and it's just the word of a 4-year-old and they're just like shoestringing a case to try to get something to stick? So I don't know what's going to happen with that case. I know it's a cardinal rule not to, but I read the comments and I saw a lot of people saying that Galarte had previous charges and other allegations. I found the opposite. I found
There's
that
nothing out there.
the cops had a press release saying we think that he did this to all different children. Please come forward, and they had a whole bunch of charges. Then all of a sudden, there's one charge, and nobody came forward, and there's no additional charges. So if I'm wrong, let me know. I'd love to read a previous criminal history, but I don't see anything about this guy.
Yeah. But well, and also in I'm from the 80s, right? I remember the Martin preschool case, which was in California. It's like 35, 40. They tend to overwhelm a defendant with
Right.
because you were in charge of a school, you could have been doing this for 30 years and like literally 40, 50 kids come out of the woodwork, which is why we see these guys getting, life sentences, ridiculous 1,000-year sentence because
Stacked on top of each other.
right, because they're all on top of each other. The fact that we haven't seen that, not a good indicator, right?
Right.
Or they have a slam dunk for 8 years and they're going, okay, we're going for those 8 years.
Right. I'm confused. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I really don't. And at the beginning of this, when I saw the evidence that was presented, I said, "Wow, that's terrible. This guy probably did this." Now I don't
Who
know.
knows?
I want to see the trial just like everybody else. Hopefully that one's broadcast. It always drives me crazy when I firmly believe that sunlight's the best sanitation. Like all of this should be broadcast, all of this should be live, and we should be able to see it.
Well, we got the verdict that Cain fans, and you and I are both Cain fans, really hoped he would get to me, which is enough to, okay, don't do that. But he's going to be home very, very shortly. As always, Pat, appreciate your insight. Where can the fans find you if they get in trouble in Florida and need you?
Thank you. And thank you for having me on. Defender Donahue Law, defenderd.com. If you need me for car accident cases or criminal law, you know where to find me.
I do appreciate it. And we'll keep you updated on this molestation case as it happens. Pat and I will be on it. And we'll bring you more news. But Cain only getting 5 years, as Pat said, might end up being 1 or 2 years. But all the Cain fans, you have reason to celebrate. And we'll be back and talking about soon. See you later, Pat.
Thanks for having me.